Picture this, you're living in the Algarve. You're 20 minutes drive from some of the most beautiful beaches in the region. And every time you go to your town centre, you get to see this. This is the reality of life in Silves, one of the most beautiful and authentic towns in the Algarve. Now, a lot of people think living inland in the Algarve means missing out on the real Algarve experience, being able to walk to the beach, things like that. But I'm going to show you why Silves is somewhere that should be on your consideration list. Hi, I'm James. I'm the creator of Portugalist.com, and I'm the author of Moving to Portugal Made Simple. I've created this virtual scouting trip series so you can explore Portugal and figure out where you might want to live. And today for our scouting trip, we are visiting Silves in the central Algarve. If you're considering moving to Silves, this video is for you. I'm going to walk you through the pros and cons of living here, and by the end of it, you should have an idea of whether this medieval town is right for you. Now, just to give you a little intro to this town, Silves is a small city, officially a city, with a population of around 11,000 people in the town centre, though this extends to just under 40,000 in the entire municipality. It is officially a city, although it's much more of a small town, small enough that you'll recognize faces at the Saturday market, but big enough that there are enough restaurants and cafes to keep you busy here. The town is famous for its Moorish history. You just can't miss that huge red sandstone castle that dominates the skyline. Silves was in fact once the capital of the Algarve region. The town also has a beautiful cathedral, an old Roman bridge, and it's surrounded by citrus groves. It's an orange producing region and produces some of the best oranges in the whole of Portugal. Every August, there's the Silves Medieval Fair, which transforms the town into a multi-day long medieval festival. But what's the best thing about living in Silves? I would say it's the charm, first of all, the beauty, and also the authenticity. So there are plenty of expats living here. And yes, Silves does attract plenty of tourists. I mean, with that castle, it's hard not to. But there are still plenty of Portuguese people here, and it does have a Portuguese feel to it. It also doesn't feel completely overrun with tourists, and it doesn't become a ghost town in winter. Now, roughly where is Silves on a map? We mentioned it's in the central Algarve region. So Silves is located about 5 miles or 8 kilometers inland from the coast. Faro Airport, that's the main airport for the region, is roughly a 45-minute drive away. To get to the nearest beaches, say Praia de Marinha, for example, it would take around 20 minutes by car, so it's not that far from the coast. Silves has very much of a small town vibe, and it's quite peaceful and it's quite quiet. It is busy on the main market day, which is Saturday, and it does attract plenty of tourists during the summer months who mainly come to visit the castle, the other attractions in the town, and then go home in the evening. Overall, though, I do think you get that slower pace of life. The town centre itself is very beautiful. It has cobblestone streets, obviously has that impressive castle dominating the skyline, and there's plenty of traditional Portuguese architecture as well. More and more people are moving here, mainly retirees and families. You won't find the digital nomad community that you'd find in coastal towns like Lagos and Portimão, where there are co-working spaces and nomad meetups. So if you are working remotely or freelancing, that might be more of your scene over there. People do speak English here, even though we're slightly inland. There is obviously a little bit less English spoken than on the coast, but most people will have some level of English, if not a pretty good level of English. I think just in general, English is widely spoken throughout the Algarve. Now let's talk about the weather. This is the Algarve, so 300 days of sunshine per year is not unusual, at least according to the tourism board. Summers can be quite hot, often reaching 30 degrees Celsius, that's about 86 Fahrenheit, or more. Sometimes it goes up to 35, that's around 95 Fahrenheit. Sometimes it goes higher. Now, here's the big difference between living here inland and living on the coast, which is that you don't get that coastal breeze. So it is going to be slightly hotter here than it would be on the coast. Now, the big selling point of Algarve's weather is actually not so much in summer, unless you like being particularly warm. It's in winter. Wintertime in the Algarve is pretty mild and pretty pleasant. Now, temperatures during the day are usually around 17, 18 degrees Celsius. That's roughly around 64 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's perfect for year-round activities. You can go walking, you can go surfing, you can do things like that in the wintertime that you wouldn't be able to do in other parts of Europe. Another thing to think about, though, getting on with weather, is that in recent years, the surrounding countryside in Silves has been affected by wildfires, particularly between Silves and the Montchique area. So it is something to think about, particularly if you are thinking about living in the rural part of Silves. Okay, so let's take a look at how much it would cost to rent or to buy in Silves. Now we're on Idealista, which is the main property website in Portugal. It is a very good place to start your search. I think for rentals, at least, you'll probably have to go a little wider than this. Most properties are included for purchase on Idealista, but not necessarily rentals. So we have typed in Silves and we've ended up on Silves municipality first. This is a common thing in Portugal where towns and cities have the same name as the area. We need to narrow it down a little bit further. Even now we are on the sort of area surrounding Silves included. So if you were not going to have a car, for example, this might be a little bit too far out. But for the purpose of this, let's take a look at the 11 properties available to rent here. Now, that isn't a huge number. We're going to select T2, which is a 2-bedroom property. T0 is a studio, T1 is a 1-bedroom. And we're also going to select long-term residential because we don't want short-term rentals if we're going to live here, especially if we need the property for visa purposes. And just to sort by lowest price, so first things first, we do see a mobile home there. I'm just going to skip over that one and go straight to the first property, which is a T2. So a 2-bedroom property. Does look like it has air conditioning there, which is a good thing. Potentially a little small. We can see that the living room and the kitchen are quite close together. Not unusual in Portugal or Europe, but that gives us an idea of what that property is like. We can see there's another one for 1,200. This looks like it has been renovated recently. It's nice and clean and white. So starting from around €1,000 a month, at 1,900, it looks like you can get a T2 with a swimming pool. These properties do look very similar. They could even be the same one. And then we jump up to €3,000 a month. So we get an idea there that there isn't a huge number of properties available. We would need to look a little bit further, but starting from around about €1,000 a month. Now, if we go to buy in Silvish, we're going to get a lot more options. Typically, people are more likely to, list the property to buy on Idealista. So the first few properties that we see, again, we're going to go for a T2. The first few that we see at the lowest price look to be ruins. So if you're looking for something to do up, something to consider, but let's see how much it would cost till we get to something that is actually livable. So this at 130,000 doesn't look too bad. Probably still needs quite a bit of work. Well, it does need the doors put on at least, and looks like it needs quite a bit of cleaning. Okay, this is still in the renovation category. We're jumping up to €160,000 now. Haven't seen inside the property yet. Here we go. It looks like it's potentially dated and would need some renovations, but more livable. 160,000, that is in need of renovations. Looks like these two here are ruins. Now we're up to 180,000 for a T4. This looks very cute in the countryside. We haven't seen inside it yet, which does suggest that it might need work done. Then we jump up to 190,000. Okay, so this is a T2. The actual listing says T4. It's listed there as a T2. Not sure what we're going to end up with. It looks like a nice coat of yellow on the outside. Lovely Algarve colors. Okay, so now we're inside. Beautiful Portuguese tiles, beautiful as wooden ceilings there. This is a very typical Algarve looking property. Looks like it would be nice and it would be suitable for living straight away. So that's about 200,000. We can see another one. This one definitely hasn't been developed yet. So looks like 200,000 is sort of the starting point, but probably going up from that. So that does start to give us an idea of what property prices would be like if you were to consider living in Silvish. Now, you may be wondering, what grocery stores are there? There are two main supermarkets here. There's a Continent and there's a Lidl. Both are walkable from the center, which is great. Although the Lidl is a little easier to walk to. There are also smaller convenience stores throughout the town as well. Between the two, you should have most of the things that you need. About a 20-minute drive away, over at Algarve Shopping, you will find the food company, which stocks British foods and other international foods. Now, you might be interested to know that there is a municipal market here. It operates daily except Sundays, and it's pretty much biggest on Saturdays. Here you'll find fresh local fruits, vegetables, fish, seafood, meat and poultry, bread, and local pastries. It's a very popular market and worth visiting even if you decide not to live in Silvish. There are other shopping places nearby. So we mentioned Algarve Shopping, as well as having the shops like the food company. You also have plenty of clothes shops there, bigger grocery store. That's around 20 minutes away. Aqua Shopping in Portimão is also around 20 minutes away. Plenty of clothes stores there and a big hypermarket as well. And if you want to drive a little further over to Mar Shopping near Faro, there's more there, including an IKEA nearby. Is it walkable? Yes, it is very much walkable. Now, the town of Silvish is built on a hill, so the hill does go up to the castle, and obviously that bit is going to be steeper and it is cobblestone, so you need to keep that in mind. The main streets in the town centre at the bottom of the hill, which is where the town centre is mainly located, those are flatter. However, do keep in mind that there is a hill there and there are cobblestone streets, so there could be mobility issues to consider there. Now, a lot of people ask, would I need a car? Public transport does exist here. So there is a train station. Silvish has a train station, but it's located around 2 kilometers outside of the town centre, which is just far enough to not be convenient. You can get taxis to and from, but it's not ideal. There are some buses as well. That might be easier because the buses do come through the town centre. However, they may not be frequent enough for everyday convenience. So you could live here car-free, but to visit the nearby beaches, to explore places like Monchique, to really get to see the Algarve, it would be a lot easier if you had a car. Now, in terms of healthcare, there is a local health centre in Silvish, which covers routine care. For major hospitals, you'd need to go a little bit further. Thankfully, the hospital in Portimão is only around a 20-minute drive. That's the nearest major public hospital. There's also a public hospital in Faro. That's a little further at around 45 minutes drive. And then there are several private hospitals in the area, including the Hospital Particular de Algarve, which is roughly 20 to 30 minutes drive away from Silvish. So let's take a look at school options. So for this example, I'm looking at Publico, goes up to 2024 at the moment. And I'm just going to take a look to see what is available in Silvish. So as we can see, there is just one school coming up. It is ranked 260. It's roughly out of 500 or so. Interestingly enough, it isn't including the international schools in there. This is the secondary school. This is a good secondary school by Algarve standards, but it is just one option. But it is good to know that there is at least one option. Now, I often look at Observador as well, and they have the secondary school in Silvish as well. They've given it a ranking of 373. So at least in the Silvish area, you are basically limited to one school if you stay in this municipality. You could potentially look at schools in the nearby municipalities, but it might be harder to get into them just because you don't live in that area. And also, you would be more likely to need to at least drive your kids to school. You wouldn't be able to rely on school buses or things like that. It would be a little bit more difficult to do. Now, also going to look at international schools. So let's see what we have available. We can take a look at the international schools available in the Algarve using this website, which is International Schools Database. So we can see that there is at least one in Silves here, which is the Dutch school. We get a little idea of what the yearly fees would be like there. If we click here, we can see this is the German school. The school does not list its fees, but we can see that that would be within driving distance. So Dutch school right in the center of Silves, German school a little bit outside. Here we have the Nobel Algarve British International School, one of the earliest international schools in the Algarve area. This proximity to all of these different international schools makes Silves a very popular option for expat families. Now, in terms of eating out, I mentioned there is a good selection of restaurants here. The majority of these focus on traditional Portuguese food. There's a famous seafood restaurant, for example, called Mariscado Rui, but there are a few international options here as well, for example, Italian. However, if you have a car, and this is why having a car is so important in the Algarve, you can easily live here and then drive 20-30 minutes to a coastal town and take advantage of what's on offer there. So who would Silves be right for? I would say Silves is a good option for someone who wants history, who wants charm, and who wants a slower pace of life. Someone who has a car ideally and doesn't mind driving to the beach and most other places. So for retirees, this is a good choice. The costs of housing are typically lower than the coast. It's a beautiful historical setting. It's a manageable size. It's reasonably walkable. I did mention the hill there. There's a good proximity to healthcare, things like that. For families as well, we mentioned schooling. There's excellent schooling options, particularly international schools nearby. It's safe. You do need to factor in school runs if you are thinking about international schools, because each of those are a short drive outside of the town centre. For digital nomads, maybe not the best choice. Obviously, you can come here if you want, but you would be limited on things like co-working spaces. There isn't really a digital nomad community here. If you want co-working spaces, if you want to be close by other remote workers and digital nomads, you'd be better off looking at somewhere like Lagos or maybe Portimão, where there are more established remote work communities. But if you like things like walking, if you like exploring, if you like history, this is a perfect place to base yourself. Now, if you're considering Silves, you're probably looking for somewhere quaint, somewhere charming, somewhere that has a little bit of history. In terms of other places that I would consider, I would look at Tavira, for example. Now, Tavira is more touristic. It is more popular. But it is right on the water, so it's a little bit cooler. It's closer to Faro and it's closer to the Eastern Algarve, which means you're also closer to Spain. It does have a good amount of history and historical buildings here. The town has been well preserved and it is very pretty. Lule is another option. It has a castle there. It also has a famous weekly market. The market day can be very busy, but otherwise it isn't too touristy. It has a similar historical feel, maybe not quite as charming, but it is larger than Silves. Another option would be Algesur, particularly if you're interested just in castles. It is much smaller and the castle ruins aren't quite as impressive, but it is on the west coast, which is perfect if you love surfing or you love walking, and it is a little bit more isolated. You'd need to go to somewhere like Lagos or even Portimão for a lot more of the services that you want. And then Faro. So Faro is now the capital of the Algarve, and this is the main city here. This is definitely larger than Silves, but it does have several historical attractions. It has plenty of built up buildings. It does have some of the high rises, but it also has plenty of the old fishermen's cottages, beautiful churches, things like that. It's also close to Faro Airport. It's close to the Ria Formosa Natural Park, and it's not too far from Spain. Now, if you liked this video, and I hope you did, here's what to do next. Be sure to like and subscribe. That way you'll get notified when there's more Portugalist content, particularly about places where you could live in the Algarve or in the rest of Portugal. Check out Portugalist.com, where you'll find a free course that'll teach you everything you need to know about moving to Portugal. For example, which visa should you get? Do you need to rent an apartment before you move here? How do you open a bank account? You'll find all of that information at Portugalist.com, as well as more information about Silves, other Algarve towns, and other places in Portugal. Now, tell me in the comments, what are your biggest concerns about living slightly inland versus on the coast? Do you think Silves is right for you? I read every comment and often create videos based on your questions. Thanks for watching this, and bye for now.